They should have been dead. In fact, by all medical logic, their lungs were dissolving. Their skin was peeling off in layers, and every single breath brought up blood. Yet somehow, they still stood. To the 7,000 German soldiers advancing on Osowiec Fortress in 1915, this wasn't a battle. It was a living nightmare, because they were convinced they were fighting an army of ghosts, not men. This incredible story begins earlier that year. During the height of World War I, the Germans had been pounding the Russian-held Osowiec Fortress for months. They brought out their biggest guns, including the infamous Big Berthas, massive siege cannons that could lob shells weighing nearly a ton. The bombardment was relentless. The skies turned black with smoke, and the very earth shook 4 miles around. But the Russian defenders, men of the 226th Zemlyansky Regiment, refused to break. They burrowed deeper into the rubble of their own fortress, holding the line with nothing but sheer, stubborn determination. The German high command grew frustrated. If they couldn't destroy the fortress with conventional artillery, they would resort to something far more sinister. They decided to kill the defenders with poison gas. On the morning of August 6, 1915, just as dawn was breaking, the wind finally blew in the right direction. The Germans opened their canisters, releasing a towering 30-foot-high wall of dark green chlorine gas. It was a horrifying sight, a silent, creeping wave of death that drifted slowly toward the Russian lines. The defenders were almost completely unprepared. They had no real gas protection, only flimsy rags they soaked in water or, in desperation, urine, and held over their faces. It was a futile gesture. As the chlorine cloud washed over them, it began to react with the moisture in their bodies, turning it into hydrochloric acid. It burned their lungs from the inside out and melted their eyes. The world around them died instantly. Grass turned black, tree leaves withered and fell, and birds dropped dead from the sky. Entire companies of Russian soldiers perished where they stood as the gas swallowed the trenches. A deep, unnatural silence fell over the fortress. The Germans, confident that everyone inside was dead, began their advance. They marched forward in neat columns, 7,000 strong, ready to claim their long-awaited victory. The fortress was theirs for the taking. But as they neared the shattered walls, a sound began to cut through the eerie quiet. It was a wet, choking cough. Then another, and another, rising from within the green mist. And then, figures began to emerge. They didn't look human. Their skin was burned and blistered. Their faces were wrapped in bloody rags, and their eyes were raw and red. With every gasping breath, they coughed up pieces of their own lungs. These were the last remnants of the 13th Company, a group of maybe 60 to 100 dying Russian soldiers who simply refused to die quietly. At their head was 2nd Lieutenant Vladimir Kat. He was so badly wounded he could barely breathe, yet he managed to raise his pistol and give the order to charge. With a final, terrifying roar, the dying men surged forward, bayonets fixed. They looked more like the walking dead than living soldiers, a shambling, bleeding horde from hell. The sight completely shattered the morale of the advancing German troops. These were hardened, experienced soldiers, but what they saw defied all logic. They weren't fighting men. They were being attacked by corpses. Panic erupted. Men started screaming. The dead are attacking. The disciplined German lines broke. In their terror, they turned and fled, trampling each other, getting tangled in their own barbed wire, and abandoning their weapons. The dying Russians, fueled by an impossible will, pursued them. They fired their rifles and stabbed with their bayonets, even as they collapsed from exhaustion in their own mortal wounds. For one incredible, impossible hour, this handful of mortally wounded men routed a force more than 100 times their size. They drove the entire German assault all the way back to their starting positions. By the time the sun finally rose, Osowiec Fortress was against all odds, still in Russian hands. It was a victory won by soldiers who'd already given their lives. 2nd Lieutenant Katlinski died later that evening from his horrific injuries. Most of the men who charged alongside him didn't survive the night, but their unbelievable counterattack, this charge of the undead, bought the Russian army just enough time. It allowed them to evacuate the rest of the fortress's personnel and supplies. Before they left, they destroyed what little remained. So when the Germans cautiously returned days later, they found nothing but rubble. The event became a legend of the war, forever known as the Attack of the Dead Men. It's a chilling, awe-inspiring moment in history that proves that sometimes the human will to fight can outlast poison, fire, and even death itself. Thanks for watching, and if you found this story as incredible as I did, make sure to like and subscribe for more. See you next time.